We're counting down 15 British foods we loved in the 60s, but don't see on shelves today. From powdered puddings to playground sweets, forgotten meat pastes to vanished lollies, each entry charts a different slice of how post-war optimism, supermarket modernity, and changing tastes shaped and erased iconic brands from everyday life. Some disappeared quietly as convenience took over. Others met sudden endings in boardrooms or amid safety scares. But which lost favorite tells the most surprising story of cultural change? Let's begin our journey back in time, starting with number 15. Number 15. Vesta curry arrived on supermarket shelves in the early 1960s, its bright box promising adventure in a hurry. Inside, freeze-dried rice, powdery sauce, and tiny cubes of meat waited for boiling water and a saucepan. No chopping, no pan-watching, just the future in a packet. Housewives, newly pressed for time as more entered the workforce, found in Vesta a shortcut to something that looked and smelled almost foreign. It was Britain's first boxed curry, a meal that let families imagine they were tasting the world, even if the recipe was carefully dialed down to avoid alarming the average palate. Bachelors, the company behind it, spent heavily on TV adverts and supermarket displays, riding a wave that saw dried convenience foods jump by 200% in the decade. Yet as the years passed, tastes changed. Authentic curries appeared in takeaways and restaurants, and Vesta's mild, reconstituted version began to feel like a relic. By the 1990s, it quietly slipped from most shelves, remembered less for its flavor than for the moment it captured. A Britain eager for novelty, but not yet ready for the real thing. Number 14. Lion's Made Zoom Lolly burst onto the scene in the summer of 1969, a rocket-shaped ice lolly timed to catch the nation's moon fever. Its triple-layered stripes, red, yellow, and orange, were meant to echo the countdown to Apollo 11's historic liftoff. The launch was a scramble. Designers worked through the night, and a last-minute shortage of printed wrappers forced the first batch onto shelves in plain, unbranded film. No matter. Children queued at corner shops, clutching pennies saved from pocket money, eager to taste the future on a stick. Sales spiked as TV screens flickered with images of Neil Armstrong's first steps, and for a brief moment, every playground in Britain pulsed with space race excitement. Yet the Zoom lolly's time in orbit was short. By the 1990s, after corporate mergers and a drive to slim product lines, Nestlé quietly retired the rocket. Its disappearance marked not just the end of a summer treat, but the fading of an era when even an ice lolly could promise the stars. Number 13. Cadbury Aztec bar entered the fray in 1967, wrapped in purple foil and ambition. Its thick milk chocolate and caramel fudge center were designed to take on the Mars bar, a direct challenge from Britain's chocolate giant. The first bite was a slow melt, the kind that lingered in packed school bags and corner shop paper bags. For a time, it seemed destined to become a staple. Yet behind the scenes, boardroom calculations set the stage for its downfall. By the mid-1970s, Britain's entry into the EEC triggered a sharp rise in sugar prices, squeezing margins across the confectionery industry. Cadbury's own board minutes from 1978 reveal a split. Marketers argued for a relaunch, citing loyal fans and the bar's place in playground folklore, while finance directors warned that Aztec's sales never matched its rivals and sugar contracts were bleeding profits. Even a last-ditch Save Aztec TV campaign failed to move the needle. When the decision came, it was swift. Production lines halted, and within months Aztec vanished from shelves, leaving only the memory of its sweet, chewy defiance, a brief spark in the long war of the chocolate bars. Number 12. Spangles meant pocket money well spent. Square, brightly colored, and wrapped in cellophane that crinkled in your pocket, these boiled sweets were more than just a treat. They were a ritual at the corner shop. Each roll promised a lucky dip: cola, orange, blackcurrant, or the elusive Old English mix. Advert jingles stuck in children's heads long after the last sweet dissolved. In the 1960s, Spangles filled lunchboxes and coat pockets, their sharp fruit flavors a world away from the softer, chewier confections that would follow. Sales records from the late 70s show a slow decline as tastes shifted towards gums and chews, and shelf space went to newer brands with bolder packaging. The cellophane wrappers, once a fixture in playgrounds and cinema queues, became rare. By 1988, Spangles were quietly delisted, leaving behind only the memory of their tang and the sound of wrappers torn open on the bus ride home. Their absence marks the end of the boiled sweets reign, a small but telling sign of how British confectionery moved on. Number 11. Rowntree's Tooty Frooties brought a burst of color to school lunchboxes from the moment they landed in 1963. Each packet rattled with bright, sugar-dusted chews: lime, lemon, orange, strawberry, stacked together like a miniature fruit market. Children tipped them into cupped hands during break time, trading flavors or counting to see who got the most reds. For a generation, Tooty Frooties meant the taste of summer in the middle of a school day, the cellophane packet a badge of playground status. But behind the scenes, the world of sweets was changing. When Nestle acquired Rowntree in 1988, boardroom priorities shifted. Production lines in York and Fordham, once bustling with the scent of boiling sugar, faced closure as the company focused on bigger sellers like Kit Kat and Smarties. By the late 1990s, Tooty Frooties quietly vanished from most shelves, a casualty of cost-cutting and the relentless squeeze for supermarket space. Their absence is a reminder of how even the brightest treats can fade, not from lack of love, but from the silent arithmetic of corporate consolidation. Number 10. Barrett's Sherbet fountain was a powdery riot in every school bag, a sweet that seemed engineered for mischief. The original paper tube, striped yellow and black, hid a fizzing sherbet dust that would escape at the slightest squeeze. Children clamped the licorice straw between their teeth, daring each other to inhale a storm of sugar straight from the tube. School cloakrooms bore the evidence. Sticky fingers, sherbet streaks on jumpers, a faint citrus tang in the air. Teachers waged a losing battle against the mess, with some schools banning the treat entirely by the late 1970s. Safety and hygiene campaigns, gathering pace in the 1980s, cast a suspicious eye on open-ended packaging. By 1985, the paper tube gave way to plastic, a move meant to reassure parents, but one that dulled the sense of danger. Sales dipped as the novelty faded, and new, less troublesome sweets took over the playground. The sherbet fountain's wildness was tamed, and with it, a small rebellion vanished from British childhoods. Its absence from shelves today is a quiet victory for order, but a loss for those who remember the thrill of a mouthful of fizz and the risk of a sherbet sneeze. Number 9. Corona Pop arrived with a hiss and a clatter on the doorstep, its glass bottles lined up in wooden crates, promising a weekly burst of fizz long before the supermarket shelf became king. The sound of the Corona van, engine idling at the curb, brought children running with empty bottles in hand, ready to trade them for a new round: limeade, dandelion and burdock, cherryade, each flavor brighter than the last. Mothers counted out coins, sometimes adding a bottle of ginger beer for Sunday tea, while delivery men tallied up empties and left paper slips tucked behind the door. This was convenience before convenience meant shrink-wrapped and shelf-stable. In the 1960s, Corona's reach stretched from Cardiff to Carlisle, a Beecham brand that turned fizzy pop into a ritual as familiar as the milk round. Yet as the decade turned, the world changed. Supermarkets, with their endless aisles and 2-for-1 deals, made the doorstep delivery seem old-fashioned and costly. By the late 1980s, Britvic, now in charge, quietly wound down the home delivery service. The bottles disappeared, the last vans were sold off, and the Corona name faded into corporate portfolios. What remains is the memory of a knock at the door, a crate of glass chilled from the morning air, and a time when even something as simple as a bottle of pop was brought to your home, not plucked from a fluorescent-lit shelf. 8th place belongs to Fray Bentos tinned pies, the oven-ready answer to a weeknight meal in post-war Britain. Their blue and gold tins stacked high on supermarket shelves, promising meat and gravy under a pastry lid, no rolling pin or roasting tray required. By 1970, the Fray Bentos factory was turning out over 20 million pies a year for the UK market, a figure that spoke to the hunger for convenience in a country where both parents increasingly worked and dinner needed to be sorted quickly. Housewives and bachelors alike learned the trick: pierce the lid, pop it in the oven, and wait for the crust to puff and brown. For a while, the pies were a fixture, as familiar as the kettle or the tin of beans beside them. But the tide turned in 1964, when a typhoid outbreak in Aberdeen, traced not to the pies but to Fray Bentos corned beef, sent shockwaves through the aisles. The Milne inquiry laid bare the failings in food safety, and suddenly all tinned meat wore a shadow. Sales of canned pies faltered as suspicion crept in, and even the Queen's visit to Aberdeen could not fully restore faith. Supermarkets, ever attuned to shopper anxiety, began to halve the shelf space for canned pies by the mid-1980s, trimming the range to only the most popular varieties. Regulatory scrutiny tightened, but the damage was done. Fray Bentos pies, once a symbol of modern ease, became a casualty of lost trust. Their absence from today's shelves is a reminder that convenience can unravel overnight when confidence is shaken. Number 7 belongs to Cremola foam, Scotland's answer to the fizzy drinks craze. Sold in squat tins with bright tartan labels, the powder turned water into a bubbling pastel cloud with just a spoon and a glass. Children fought over the last crystals, watching the foam rise and fizz, a science experiment you could taste. The ritual was as important as the flavor: raspberry, orange, lemon, each with a sharpness that cut through the sweetness, tingling on the tongue and staining lips pink or gold. Mothers measured out teaspoons at birthday parties or on quiet afternoons, knowing a tin could stretch for weeks and cost less than a single bottle of lemonade. In the 1960s, before plastic bottles lined every shelf, Cremola foam was a fixture in Scottish kitchens, a treat that felt homemade but modern, a little jet-age magic for the Highlands and the schemes alike. Yet the world moved on. Supermarket aisles filled with ready-to-drink sodas, their convenience and branding pulling children away from the old tins. Health campaigns in the 1980s warned of sugar and tooth decay, and the sight of a foaming glass became rarer still. By the 1990s, the last tins were quietly retired. A brief revival in 2019 sparked nostalgia, but for most, Cremola foam remains a memory of tart fizz and sticky fingers, a reminder of a time when making your own pop felt like a small act of invention. Number 6 belongs to Bird's custard powder, the yellow tin that once stood sentry in nearly every British larder. For decades, Sunday pudding was not complete without a jug of steaming custard. Thickened from powder and milk on the hob, stirred until it coated the back of a spoon. Mothers measured out the pale granules by eye, a ritual as familiar as the roast itself. The tin's bold red script was a promise. No lumps if you whisked, no disappointment if you waited. By the 1970s, though, the ritual began to slip. Supermarket fridges filled with chilled, ready-to-pour custard, sold by the carton, glossy and cold. The National Food Survey captured the shift. Powder sales fell sharply after chilled custard's launch, and by 1983, the new cartons outsold the old tins 2-1. Microwaves, arriving in British kitchens in the same decade, made the process even quicker. No saucepan, no whisk, just a minute and a beep. Children who once licked the spoon now peeled back foil lids. The taste changed too. Richer, more uniform, less likely to split if you turned away for a moment. For some, it was progress, a small victory for convenience, a sign that dessert could be as easy as tea. For others, it marked the end of a household rite. The tin still exists, but its place on the shelf is a shadow of what it was. The custard powder that once meant patience and presence is now mostly a memory, edged out by the cool certainty of the chilled dessert aisle. Number 5 belongs to Brock's meat paste, a small jar that once sat beside the bread bin in kitchens across Britain. The spread inside was unremarkable in color, pale, pinkish, sometimes flecked with white fat. But it answered a need. Housewives, pressed for time and pennies, reached for it as a sandwich filler that kept longer than ham and cost less than cheese. School lunchboxes bore the scent of it, sealed between 2 slices of white loaf and wrapped in waxed paper. In the 1960s, as the National Food Survey recorded a steady rise in sandwich consumption, meat pastes like Brock's found their market among workers and children alike. A jar could last a week, its metal lid screwed back on after each scrape, offering a thrifty solution when the larder was thin. Supermarket shelves carried whole rows, chicken, beef, even fish, each promising protein without the fuss of cooking or the risk of spoilage. Yet the tide began to turn in the late 70s. The arrival of supermarket deli counters, bright with freshly sliced ham and roast beef, changed the rules. Refrigeration, once a luxury, became standard, and shoppers grew accustomed to the sight and smell of cold meats, sliced to order and wrapped in crisp paper. The paste jars, once a symbol of sensible thrift, started to look old-fashioned, their appeal dulled by the promise of something fresher. By the late 1980s, as chilled sandwich fillings took over and new spreads crowded the shelves, Brock's faded from view. Its absence marks the quiet shift from shelf-stable necessity to the expectation of daily freshness, a change written in the margin of every supermarket sandwich aisle. Number 4 belongs to Mr. Whippy, the original soft-serve van that turned British summers into a rolling festival of anticipation. The pink and white swirl, dispensed from a chrome lever, was more than a dessert. It was a signal. Children heard the jingle blocks away, coins gripped in sweaty hands, racing to the curb before the van rolled on. Imported from Italy in 1958, the soft-serve machines brought a new texture to British ice cream, lighter, colder, and impossibly smooth, a break from the dense slabs sold in bricks. By the mid-1960s, Mr. Whippy's fleet numbered in the hundreds, each van a franchise with its own patch of high street or seaside promenade. The brand was everywhere, yet nowhere fixed, no single shop, no supermarket shelf, just the promise of a treat that arrived with the weather. But that freedom came with a price. Councils, wary of noise and congestion, began tightening trading permits in the 1980s, forcing vans to compete for ever-shrinking turf. The Mr. Whippy name itself faded, diluted by a swarm of imitators and independent operators who bought similar machines and painted their own signs. By the time supermarket multipacks appeared in freezer aisles, the original soft serve had scattered into 100 local brands, each a little less certain than before. The memory lingers, though, in the sound of a distant chime and the first taste of cold cream on a hot day, a reminder of a time when summer was measured not by the calendar, but by the arrival of the van. Number 3 belongs to Bird's Instant Whip, the powdered dessert that made weeknight puddings possible in minutes and left a mark on the town of Banbury long after its last packet left the line. For decades, the factory on the edge of town was more than a workplace. It was a source of pride, a routine, and, for many women, the first steady pay packet. The air inside carried a faint, sweet tang, vanilla and chocolate dust settling on hair and overalls, clinging to the chatter of night shifts and the steady hum of machines. Over 200 jobs depended on those sachets, each one a promise of raspberry mousse or butterscotch whip, whisked up after tea and spooned into glass dishes lined up on the sideboard. But in 1982, the news broke. Production would move overseas, the company chasing lower costs and higher margins. Union minutes from that spring record a meeting heavy with anger and disbelief. Workers spoke of a sisterhood built over conveyor belts, now scattered by a decision made in distant boardrooms. The Banbury press mourned more than lost wages. It was the end of a ritual, shifts that fit around school runs, friendships that grew in the canteen, the quiet confidence of making something that ended up in kitchens across the country. After the move, Bird's Instant Whip shrank from the shelves. Supermarkets, under pressure to stock only the fastest sellers, found little room for a dessert that now arrived by container ship instead of lorry. The packets, once a fixture in the weekly shop, became harder to find. For Banbury, the closure was a lesson in the cost of modernization. Not just lost jobs, but lost routines and a fading sense of purpose. Bird's Instant Whip survives in memory as more than a pudding mix. It is a reminder of the people who made it, and the town that changed when the machines fell silent. In second place, powdered instant desserts promised a shortcut to pudding, a miracle of modern chemistry whisked up in minutes from a sachet. Angel Delight, Instant Whip, and their rivals crowded the shelves, each packet a pastel cloud of promise. Strawberry, butterscotch, banana, made possible by a cocktail of stabilizers, thickeners, and colors. In the late 1960s, these desserts were a fixture of the British weeknight table, their sweetness a reward after tea, their convenience a boon for mothers pressed between work and home. By 1968, the category was so popular that the National Food Survey recorded a 40% increase in sales over just 5 years, with some families serving instant mousse as often as twice a week. Then came the reckoning. The consumer watchdog, which published a report in 1968 that landed like a thunderclap. Its pages detailed the presence of E-numbers, especially E102, tartrazine, and E110, sunset yellow, in the most beloved brands, warning of potential health risks and stirring a national debate about what exactly was being spooned into children's bowls. Newspapers seized on the story, and within weeks, sales of powdered desserts began to slide. Some manufacturers scrambled to reformulate, dropping the most controversial colors and reprinting their boxes to boast of no artificial additives. Others waited, hoping the storm would pass. It did not. By the late 1970s, the entire category had shrunk by nearly 40%, a collapse tracked in supermarket shelf plans and internal memos. The old adverts, once so bright and confident, faded from the airwaves. For a generation, the powdered pudding was a symbol of progress, a sign that science could sweeten everyday life. But the E-number backlash changed the rules, turning once trusted treats into objects of suspicion. The disappearance of these desserts from everyday shelves is not just a story of changing taste, but a lesson in how consumer power and regulatory scrutiny can reshape what a nation eats and what it leaves behind. And finally, in first place, tripe and cowheel stand as silent witnesses to a vanished Britain, one shaped by thrift, necessity, and the unspoken rules of class. In the kitchens of the North, tripe simmered in enamel pans, its pale folds bobbing in onion-scented water, while cowheel, slow-cooked from the tough cartilage of cattle feet, gave up its jelly to thickened stews. For generations, these offal dishes were more than food. They were proof of making do, of stretching a shilling until payday. The National Food Survey recorded that in 1962, Britons bought nearly half an ounce of tripe per person each week. By 1978, that figure had plummeted by 70%, a collapse sharper than for any other staple. The change was visible on the high street. Specialist tripe shops, once numbering 80 nationwide, fell to fewer than 10 by 1985. Most clung on in Lancashire or Yorkshire, serving an aging clientele who remembered ration books and the taste of vinegar on a Friday night. Oral histories tell of mothers who swore by the cheapness and nourishment, of children who wrinkled noses at the texture, and of fathers who shrugged. It fills you, doesn't it? Before heading out to the mill or the yard. Yet as Britain grew wealthier and supermarkets replaced the butchers and market stalls, offal became a marker of the past, edged out by the promise of choice and the stigma of poverty. Cookbooks stopped printing recipes for tripe and cowheel. TV chefs turned away, and the new British palate, shaped by rising wages, foreign holidays, and the lure of convenience, left little room for dishes that tasted of thrift. What was once a badge of survival became a symbol of what people wanted to forget. The disappearance of tripe and cowheel from everyday shelves is not just a culinary footnote. It is the story of how a nation's appetite changed, how class lines blurred, and how the foods that once defined us were quietly set aside. In their absence, we glimpse the cost of progress, a Britain eager to move forward, but at the price of leaving its humblest comforts behind. From Vesta curries' boxed dinners to the vanished tripe and cowheel of working-class kitchens, our countdown of 15 British foods traces a remarkable arc of change in post-war Britain. The most shocking transformation comes at the top. Tripe's 70% consumption drop and the near extinction of tripe shops reflect not just a shift in taste, but a seismic change in social identity and class. Across all entries, patterns emerge. The rise of convenience and novelty in the 1960s, displaced by supermarket consolidation, changing health standards, and evolving consumer expectations. Iconic brands like Spangles and Bird's Instant Whip fell victim to corporate rationalization or health scares, while products such as Cremola foam and Mr. Whippy show how regional tradition and street culture faded under national trends. What made these foods qualify wasn't just disappearance from shelves, but the way each tells a story of Britain modernizing, where industrial innovation, affluence, and regulation shaped what we ate. In the end, these vanished flavors remind us that food history is social history, and the foods we lose reveal as much about who we've become as those we still savor today.